Today I'm going to cover top 10 Linux interview questions and answers for DevOps engineers. I'm going to try and do this in about 10 minutes. Just remember that this shouldn't be like a Linux sysadmin interview. Usually Linux is encountered in DevOps engineering when you maybe have VMs, but typically often also these days it could be in a runner, in a CI/CD pipeline, or also even in a Kubernetes cluster. You may have to exec into a pod. That is, after all, a Linux-like environment. So here we go, first one. How do you make a file executable? And the answer is chmod plus X or chmod U plus X if you just wanted to do it for the user. What I would say is, for this question, if you're asked in an interview, you may well also need to know numeric permissions and how they work. So I've just given a hint here, but you can obviously also read up about it, that you've got RWX, read, write, execute, which gives you a score, I think it's called an octal score, 4, 2, and 1. So for example, directories, and this is in a web server, directories and executables will have permissions of 755, and anything else, i.e. files, will be 644. So 755 indicates that the everyone has read and execute rights, but the owner also obviously can write. And remember, in a directory you need execute rights to be able to navigate through a directory, I think, or to view it. I forget which way around. And for files, it's just one less. You don't need execute rights, but again, everyone needs to be able to read, and the owner needs to obviously be able to write because they can edit. So how to make a file executable: chmod plus X or chmod U plus X. Next one, how to see the current environment variables, print env. Simple as that. You might have to see this typically when you want to see inside like a container or something like that. But yeah, if there's an issue with an app, then it can be due to the lack of or the wrong environment variables, and print env is required to diagnose, to have a look. How to display IP address. Now, they may say internal, or they may say external, or they may not say anything, but in general, ifconfig or IPA, which is short for IP address, either of those will do. It should give you all the interfaces and show you the IP address on the interfaces. And if they ask for a gateway, then it's actually a different command. You want to use IP root, or you can use root tac-n or netstat-rn, and actually these last two ones, they will give you pretty much identical output. For an external IP, it's a bit different, because typically a machine that's internal, it won't necessarily be able to see what is the external IP associated with it. There is, let's say, layers of infrastructure in the way. One of the best ways to do it is simply just to curl an external site that is like an endpoint designed to return the source IP address it sees that you have on the internet. So for example, curl ifconfig.me, and there are also other sites, but this is a really easy one to remember because ifconfig is just like this. How to view kernel logs? The easiest way to answer is dmessage. There's also other ways. I said bonus here. journalctl, tac-k, or you can just generally say, and this is by the way for anything using systemd, which is most Linux distros but not all. You can also say that it's in var log. Now this depends on the distro, so I wouldn't go into any more detail than that. So for example, some distros it might be in kern.log, in others it might be in messages. It really depends on the distro. You don't want to start claiming any specific knowledge of distros unless you really are really hot on that. If you're asked how to view kernel logs, just say dmessage. But if they push you further, you can always say journalctl tac-k or in log directory. How to test connectivity to another system's IP and port? A simple way is just telnet space IP address space port, and this has long been used. Another way is to use netcat, which is nc. And there are other ways, but telnet and nc you're going to find in most Linux environments. That they should have one or both of these available, and probably not likely the other tools. So just say telnet. How to view firewall status? Well, there's two types of firewall. There's UFW or firewall D, and the commands are UFW or firewall-cmd, and that's how you can view the status. And by the way, the default rule on if you have either firewall installed is usually a default deny. Even if you haven't got a deny rule set up, it's a default deny. So you have to explicitly create an allow rule. Now, they may ask you about, well, what's actually behind all these, and actually you've got something on all Linux called IP tables. And a lot of people think IP tables is a firewall. It's not a firewall, it's a packet filter. And it allows you to filter on packets to say input, forward, and output. But if they're asking about firewall, it should be UFW or firewall-CMD. How to list all processes. So not just the user ones. You want to do PS TAC EF or PS AUX, or a bit more interactive, but something that you wouldn't use in scripts is top. So top is interactive, and PS you'd use in scripts. And there's HTOP as well. But yeah, you'll be kind of expected to know that these are the most common ways to see all processes: PS TAC EF or PS AUX. Obviously, if you just put PS in, you're only going to get your own user processes. So you're generally more interested when troubleshooting to see the system, the entire system as a whole, user and system processes, so the entire environment, the entire on your Linux device, what all the processes are, so you can see what is hogging the CPU and the memory, etc. So PS TAC EF, PS AUX, you'll sound like you know what you're doing. How to display the current listening ports, netstat tulpen. This is a nice easy way to remember this. It kind of looks like tulip and with an N on the end, so tulpen. And actually, although most people remember this, if you want to look for listening ports, if you run this command, it'll only show it for TCP ports. So this is like TCP, UDP, okay, include listening ports. And actually the U isn't needed because UDP is connectionless, so there's no such thing as a listening state with UDP, and that's why you'll only see the listening state next to the TCP ports. The UDP ports won't show anything listening because there's no such thing as a listening UDP port. But just generally, this is the command to remember: netstat tulpen. You get an error, no space left on the device, but there's plenty of free disk space. Why? This is a very common question, and it's super easy if you know. And that's because of inode exhaustion. So if you don't know what inodes are, they're just like disk space. A disk has a limited number of bytes that you can write to it. Also on a disk, there's another limit, and it's called inodes. And inodes are a metadata structure. So when you do a directory listing, you're getting things like file name, you're getting permissions, you're getting all this extra metadata information about the file. And there is a limit to the number of inodes as well. And you will exhaust this limit if you have, for example, a lot of small files, because that's a lot of metadata. So if you have a lot of small files, especially logs, then you can exceed your inodes before even your disk space. You can check inodes with df tac I, disk free command, which you normally use for checking disk space, but you can also do a tac I to see inodes. Which command to search for patterns in a file? You should know grep. It's quite often used after a pipe. And I would also, as a bonus, these are 3 common switches. So tac I for case insensitive, tac R for recursive if you want to go through a number of directories, and tac V is to invert your pattern. So if you do grep and you're looking for a search term, you can use tac V to find everything except where that search term is found. So those were the top 10 Linux interview questions and answers for DevOps engineers that I've experienced, and I see a lot of people being asked. Hope you found them useful. If you did, please give the video a like, and please check out our channel for more such videos on Linux, Bash, Python, Terraform, infrastructure as code, cloud, Kubernetes, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.